In a similar vein to the likes of Team Fortress 2, Payday 2 has really shaped a lot of what I tend to do. From its highs, lows, and all-around oddities, it has managed to make it through a 10-year life cycle to become an incredibly janky but still highly enjoyable experience. It offers plenty of heists, characters, and especially weapons to flex your muscles with and fight against the cops in your bid to steal riches beyond comprehension. But suppose the timeline was different. What if we lived in a world where Payday 2 in present day was the exact same, except that no new weapons or tools outside of what the game started with were added? With all the difficulties and other heists that got implemented into the game, as well as the litany of DLC, would it still be beatable? Well, that's what I aim to find out. Today I'll be ready to answer the question, can you beat Payday 2 with only launch day weapons? Rules are as you'd expect for the most part. The objective is to get through all of the career mode heists from the jewelry store and bank heist to the White House on the Death Wish difficulty. I will be using the standard Vanilla HUD Plus as my HUD mod for the run and the More Heists and Crime Spree mod for the Crime Spree portion of the challenge. As for what we're allowed to use, we can only use weapons that were part of Payday 2 from its initial launch day all the way back in 2013. We'll be working out just what that entails in a moment. I'll also be aiming to use each weapon in a successful heist at least once, akin to my Throwables only run. And I will also be riding solo on loud heists, but I can bring my AI crewmates to stealth heists if what they end up doing is not going to be relevant to the heist's outcome. Anyway, with that taken care of, let's do this. We're really going old school this time, as it's plain old Dallas in his plain old suit and mask for this one. No fancy costumes, characters, or all that many masks back then, of course. Now, you'd think that outlining what weapons we're allowed to use for this challenge might be tricky, given the abundance of weapons, both 3 and DLC, that litter the lists these days. And you'd be correct. So it's just as well that we have a handy ancient guide from Bane himself to give us a full list of what we can actually use. So, let's rapid fire them real quick. From the bottom to the top, we have access to the AMCAR UAR CAR4 M308 AK5 AK AK762 JP36 AMR16 Rheinfeld 880 ISMA 12 gauge Mosconi 12 gauge Shimano 88 Strike 18C Crosskill Benetti 9 Deagle Bronco 44 Mark 10 CMP Brinkov Cobus 90 Compact 5 Para Locomotive 12 gauge and the over 9000 SAW. Considering the kind of weapons that released since launch day, many of them being ridiculously powerful, this isn't a bad hand to be dealt at all. Hell, it's been proven that you can more or less get through all of career mode with little more than the AMCAR and Shimano you start with, so this really shouldn't be an issue. I'm also going to allow the use of trip mines and sentry guns as offensive tools, as they too have been around since the start, even if they've changed a fair bit since their inception. As for weapon modifications, it's borderline impossible for me to discern what was and wasn't present in launch day Payday 2, so as a workaround, I'm instead not going to use any attachments or other modifications that would require DLC. This means nothing from any DLC packs, and especially no special ammunition for my shotguns. Anything that doesn't require DLC, community shenanigans or the like to use is fair game. In terms of the melee options, we don't really need to worry about it, as we're only allowed to use the weapon butt. It was literally the only melee option around back then. Also, throwables didn't exist back on launch, so they're completely banned this time around. Not that I'm too torn up about that, I've already had my fill of throwables combat for the time being. Overall, that puts us at 27 different weapons that kills will be needed with. 29 if you count the 2 equipment pieces. As for the builds I'll use, it's standard fare for when I have multiple weapon types to make use of. One for shotguns, one for automatic weapons, one for pistols, and one for stealth. Also, you can't unequip perk decks for some reason, so I just went with one that I feel would affect the gameplay loop the least, and went with muscle. With all of that out of the way, it's time to hit the road, starting with Jewelry Store to get a feel for the challenge. The AMCAR and Shimano might not rank in terms of being loud weapons, but for stealth, they're both more than serviceable, making short work of the guards and controlling the store. Things got a little sketchy when the cops manning the hot dog stand spotted what was going on, but they were soon dispatched and I was soon making it out of there with the goods. Bank Heist was similar, dispatching the camera guard before locking the photocopier room down with trip mines thanks to Jack of all trades. From there, it was a case of slowly picking off the guards that came through the area. It was during the drill startup that I noticed that I could phase Bobblehead Bob in and out of reality at certain angles. This game is magical for all the wrong reasons. With that said, it was easy enough in the end, grabbing a single bag and moving on to bigger and better things. Diamond Store's the next hit, bringing my next name off the list by disposing of the camera guard with the Bonetti 9. There was a bit of an incident by the back stairwell where my misdeeds were spotted by the civilians nearby, but for some reason, two of them seemed to just disappear from reality altogether instead of raising an alarm, leaving a single survivor to tie up. Goodness knows why and how that occurred, and honestly, who knows with this game. While I was busy dissecting that whole affair, I cleaned up the last of the guards, shut off the alarm, and tidied up the cafe area where the civvies from earlier seemed to blip out of existence. From there, I committed to cleaning out the diamonds themselves, which was handled the same way I usually handle it. I would have required more bloodshed, but since the remaining customers had the mental awareness of Mr. Bean, I was able to haul all of the bags out of the store and made my escape, silently. Honestly, that really didn't deserve a stealth clear, but that's just what I was handed. Either way, we need to switch gears for the first loud endeavor, Go Bank. Since I wanted to make use of the saw for only the second time in a challenge run after the Jason Voorhees run, I was going to have to rely on the power of the Bronco to carry me through this one. This would prove to be problematic. For one, I still have to pick up a kill with the saw, and even with the saw versus Dozer's fixed mod, that's still a risky option on Death Wish. And second, the Bronco's ammo economy isn't the best when riding solo. It didn't help that the SWAT turret appeared to make things even more treacherous than they already were, requiring me to dispatch it before getting the cage parts off the road. I was getting absolutely manhandled by all sources, and while I could breach the vault, I was soon caught out with no ammo in my revolver and went down with no Feign Death or Messiah to save my skin. The turret van didn't show up on attempt 2, but that didn't stop my failure, as even though it's outfitted with a long barrel and supplemented by pistol skills, this revolver still couldn't reliably hit snipers, resulting in me going down and being unable to land a shot to proc Messiah. On the third attempt, I decided to switch gears. Rather than faff around trying to get a saw kill on the Gensec responders, I simply used it on one of the two security guards in the bank to knock it off the list early. The bag drop this time around was a lot more favourable as it was dropped in the car park behind the bank, allowing me to set up the cage with basically no hassle. After witnessing this levitating cloaker, I was soon back in the vault, but I needed to flex the ammo bag asset to actually get my hands on a money bag. The snipers overlooking the bank roof were annoying, but I was soon able to get the cage balloon up and ready for the final defense. Which went well for a while, but soon went sour when the pilot missed on the first attempt, followed by a Skulldozer appearing on the roof who was adamant on cutting me down. Forced to abandon the cage, I simply decided to cut my way to a second money bag to take with me, as there was no way I could reclaim the roof in time. It's only typical that the pilot decides to actually lock in when there's nothing in the damn cage, needing me to walk my other money bag through the sewers and to the van. Overall, the Bronco strap wasn't an outright failure, but it would need to be supplemented by something other than the saw to be viable. In any case, we move on to the transport jobs, starting with the park where I could make use of the strike. This thing doesn't have a totally good ammo economy either, but it could at least hold its own against crowds and could shred through bulldozers if given the chance. I did need to give the police the runaround to keep things from collapsing, and I noticed that they just seem to be more relentless this time around. I guess when you do enough challenge runs for this game, the cops just have enough of your crap and want to take the initiative. But once I was through the trucks themselves, I could get at the money inside, and the van spawned right next to the ones I opened, so that was at least a bonus. Hoping for a better time, I switched over to the full auto build and brought the CMP as my acting primary in the underpass job, but the first attempt fell apart under the weight of the overpowered beat cops and FBI units that make up the first wave of hostility. Why are they more powerful than Goku in this game? Who really knows? After this second attempt started in a similarly rough fashion, I was able to pick back up and keep things moving, with the CMP being surprisingly reliable even when running limited weapon mods. This allowed me access to the deposit boxes, and despite the best efforts of the cops, they were ultimately unable to stop my success. Except that they put me into an escape section in the park, which means beat cops that can bring you down 3 times in under 30 seconds. Yippee. One benefit of this though is that I could switch my saw for another weapon, in this case the AK-5. Because of me spending most of the holdout on my last life, I did need to play defensively, but I could soon get over the line and out of this heist. Which leaves the last of the transport jobs, the train heist. The first attempt fell apart when I alerted too many guards at once in the lumberyard, but the second crack at it goes much smoother, making use of the OG silent shotgun champion, the locomotive 12 gauge, to fling bodies into more optimal positions. With my keycard and my ECM jammers, I managed to win every coin toss on the vault locations, meaning all I had to do was rewire the security buffers and eventually start the bag hauling process, which mercifully decided to be in the truck this time. Things were absolutely slow going, but by making use of the zip line for the furthest set of shells, I could soon grind this out in a little over 20 minutes. How the tides are turning, from struggling on standard transport jobs to clearing the train heist in convincing fashion, and in only 2 tries. This marks the beginning of Vlad's introduction to the storyline with Mall Crasher, and I went on a somewhat unprompted stealth run through this one, making use of the Mark 10 and JP36 to make a mess of the signs and wine bottles. It wasn't until I was done with the latter that people started to catch on, but somehow I was able to contain things further and commit target practice against these headphones, pushing me past the damage threshold for the main objective. Things just became too hard to contain after that was all wrapped up, but by that point, the hard part of the heist was complete, meaning I had a head start for waiting on the escape. Overall, a sweet and simple success. 4 stores was fairly uneventful, making use of the M308 and setting it to single fire mode, which is what I would do anyway if I had access to the fire mode mods. Nothing much to say on it in the end, grinding it out in just over 7 minutes. White Xmas was the next destination, and I got a prophecy early on when the first gift I opened held a medic bag. With the AK and CMP in my roster, things were going fine until I needed to move Harud into the chopper, at which point things started to cascade and I went down on 2 separate occasions, both times needing a Messiah charge and a fearful sprint back to that medic bag. Once he was out of harm's way though, things became simpler again, allowing me to slip away unimpeded. Ukrainian job was only noteworthy due to me actually using the Car 4 for a kill in stealth despite me holding it on the diamond store job. After that it was about as routine as you could get, getting the tiara and some bonus jewelry in the process. But with that milestone passed comes Meltdown. Here the locomotive and a loud-oriented Moscone was going to be put to the test, and I'm glad to say that they could hold their own. The Moscone in particular, even without special ammo, could still reliably tag multi-kills from several meters away when my aim was true. I wasn't quite fast enough to get out of the yard before the snipers began to spawn, meaning I was left to cower at the warehouse entrance to pick them off with the Moscone, using up both of my Messiah charges in the process. Once I got my bearings and picked off the one looking directly at the entrance, I could soon pick off the other rooftop watchers one by one until I could shift the forklift out of the compound. From there, the heist is all but won as I used the Longfellow to make 2 trips with the warheads. I did get lost on the return journey and a sniper did clip me on the final run, but I held firm and secured my victory. On to Aftershock, where I paired the locomotive with the Rheinfeld in a surprisingly effective pairing. This one was relentless and needed to stretch me to my limits, but the position of the trucks meant that I could move the safes into the train, though loading the safes themselves onto the truck was fraught with difficulty owing to the sheer ruthlessness of these cops. Unsurprisingly, I wasn't keen on holding out in the construction site, only moving towards it when Bile was moving in. Even still, I did need to clip one more sniper before I could make a mad dash for the truck. Not an easy one, but we absolutely take those. Stealing Xmas is next on Vlad's to-do list, where I propped up my Mark 10 with the UAR for this predominantly close quarters heist. Getting the toy objective early meant I got a head start before rolling into the shoe store, then the wine store to round out the main meat of the heist. One surprising thing I learned is that my supposedly short-range Mark 10 was really good at hitting snipers from across the roof of the mall, whereas my supposedly long-range UAR couldn't hit the broadside of a barn. I was prepared for a brutal battle while planting the C4, but no amount of anticipation and first aid kit spam could have possibly prepared me for this. Yeah, one of the SWATs straight up punted me through the dome and straight down to the ground floor like an action movie villain. The only reason this didn't result in a failure was because of this repelling cop putting himself in Messiah range. But even still, I'm not forgetting that one in a hurry. Once I could clear out most of the heat on the roof, I could finish planting the C4, holding out at the tree to make this a remarkable first time clear. Nightclub is not one for action, but I'm still prone to failure in stealth, such as allowing this guy to fire on attempt 1. My second crack at the whip goes much smoother at first, taking 3 threats out in one fell swoop, before opening up all the doors to gain access to the safes. From there, I simply locked down the area with trip mines and picked off any of the mobsters that came through the area. In a cruel twist of fate, as the drills were finishing up, I didn't roll a kill shot on this mobster, causing him to fire his gun and alert almost everyone in the vicinity, requiring a lot of blood on the dance floor to keep things from getting out of control. While I could secure all of the bags, one remaining mobster that spotted the carnage ended up alerting everyone else left on the map. Before long, this fella was the only loose civilian that was still alive on the map, and I soon ducked out through the nearby alleyway. What a mess. Now we get to briefly link up with Hector for Watchdogs, and unsurprisingly, the welcoming committee on day 1 picked me off in seconds. Attempt 2 goes at least a little smoother, though it's probably not helped by me picking the powerful but unreliable Krinkov. At the very least, I got the best possible loot truck spawn, meaning that after a Messiah charge usage, I could pick myself out of the hole I dug myself and proceed to day 2, which was a lot smoother than what I just had to deal with. Thanks to my switch in setup, I configured my AMR-16 to single fire mode to complement my automatic fire Cobus 90. This worked perfectly, holding the docks until the boat arrived and giving me a clean escape. But it's out of the frying pan and into the fire when it comes to Hector's jobs, with Firestarter being the next to fall. The first attempt of day 1 didn't go swimmingly, with the Mendozas ripping me to pieces early on before the SWATs finished the job in under 3 minutes. The second attempt was not great, needing an early Messiah charge, but I could get a handle on things once I regrouped, sending multiple weapon bags into the fuel tanker. Despite this, I needed to open up the trucks, which is where I probably should have packed the saw instead of the Moscone. But even then, the trucks I opened completely and utterly sucked. I had to open 3 of them, and even then, there were 5 sets of rifles between all 3 of them, with the first 2 only holding 1 bag's worth each. That was irritating, but at least I could eventually roll out of there after dealing with the ambush squad at the van. Day 2 had a customary failure after an inopportune guard spotted me right in line of sight of a camera, but the second try gave me much better RNG, managing to get all the way to moving the servers out of the building before things inevitably fell apart. As a result, the first responders were only just pulling in by the time I was rolling out. As for day 3, it inadvertently went loud when the manager decided to walk into me in front of a camera, and the vault was electrified on top of that. More pressingly though, I only had 3 trip mines to defend myself with, so I really needed to play defensively. I set up mines on the drill itself to cover myself while using the security room as a shelter. I had to make sure all of the mines used were rationed so that they weren't used too quickly, and safe to say, this did not make for engaging gameplay. But perhaps the most surreal detail of all is that this actually ended up working, hauling myself up inside the vault as the money burned while using my last mine to stop the cops from running up to me. With a shield providing the opening to leave, I got the footage for Hector before making a sprint for the van. The final job for Hector in the series is Rats, where I decided to get situated with the Deagle as I got to break bad. The Deagle isn't exactly good with ammo efficiency, but when it can tear through bulldozers like nobody's business, who's really complaining? Despite eating up more first aid kits than I reasonably would have wanted, I got my cooking done and secured the goods in under 14 minutes, which inevitably leads to the garage escape, which I just as quickly blasted through thanks to the power of the saw. On day 2, I simply dealt with the Cobras with no fuss before packing the cross kill for the battle on the bridge. As is the case in previous runs, the cops are utterly relentless on this day in particular, which makes me wonder why they aren't usually this energetic. In any case, after needing Feign Death and then Messiah, I soon cleared out the runaway Mendozas, got one final lucky Feign Death activation, and cleared out for a very messy Rats clear. It's time to switch up to the elephant's jobs, with Big Oil being the first of Chapter 2's missions. And I don't do myself any favors by immediately walking myself into an electric fence. Once I pick myself up from that though, things move along smoothly as I silently dispatch all of the bikers. More crucially though, I get both the keycard and the keychain, which will really help with the pace of day 2. Having packed the saw and an ammo bag in reserve, I use the ECM jammers and the saw on the ATMs in the basement before securing the weapons dotted around the area. I even get some bonus money out of the deal, so it's not all bad. Day 2 is where things matter most, and I had an interesting plan going into it. Switching to the para for the inevitable loud portion, I'd stealth as far as I could while using the trip mines and a single unupgraded sentry gun to cover my back in loud. Attempt 1 didn't get off to the best start as I whiffed the keycard, and a stealth domino effect caused me to apparently break a window somewhere. I did try my best to salvage the situation by covering the power boxes with trip mines, but with no jokers to help me, this was always going to be a losing battle. After calling attempt 2 early when I didn't find the server room again, I made a proper stab at the stealth portion, and even managed to get information pointing me to a 3-hose nitrogen engine, which means I'm not likely to contend with a coin toss. Keeping the area around the server room locked down with sensor mines, I made it down to the lab and deduced from the final clue that I would need engine number 8. Just as well I figured it out, as the server room was soon found by another roaming guard, sending things loud. But by this point, I was already more than prepared, even setting all of the mines I laid down to explosive mode just in case. Having no single fire mode and no shield, the sentry's not a great ally in this state, but could at least provide some form of distraction as I loaded the engine into the chopper. After that, I simply used said sentry as a distraction as I fled to the other end of the estate, which worked like a charm as it exploded for its efforts. With all of that dealt with, I simply used my remaining mines to lock down the area nearest the plane while waiting on the results, which were thankfully accurate. Overall, using sentries in this way wasn't an outright failure, but they'd need the appropriate skills if I want to make proper use of them in the future. I'd need to put that thought on the back burner though, as I have to full commit to stealth with framing frame, using my strategy of locking the whole gallery down with sensor mines. Things did get a little sketchy towards the end of this room where a stealth domino effect threatened to send me packing without all 9 paintings, but the scene went undiscovered for long enough to let me grab that painting and straight up book it out of the gallery, albeit running straight into the spawning god after the fact. Day 2 once again goes without a hitch, so it's straight to day 3. Calling attempt 1 early after the vault spawned in the epicenter, things went relatively smoothly afterwards, rolling the vault closest to the office and getting situated with minimal fuss. Before long, all of the cocaine was planted and I could make it out of there in under 10 minutes. Not bad at all under the circumstances. Which moves us on to election day, and I naturally ECM rushed day 1 to tag the wrong truck and swiftly move on to the plan C scenario. With the Compact 5 to complement my AK-5, I felt comfortable throughout the run as I quickly breached into the bank portion and got myself situated, with even the snipers not proving themselves much of a threat. In fact, across all of my builds, there's only one inherent weakness: shields. Shotgun or Aced would have been amazing to have, but I could only invest so many skill points into my setups. In any case, I was soon into the vault and loading the money out to the van, picking off the last few snipers that could have brought me down. The dentist's introduction to the storyline, Big Bank, would prove to be a step up in terms of challenge, and I got caught out early by these 2 guards, only just managing to salvage it but lacking the body bags to take care of both of them. With no keycard at all to speed things along, I just had to risk a drill on the server room door, and outside of one manager coming across the scene, this miraculously went unpunished. On top of that, the first computer I tapped into for the time lock code was correct. Stealth wasn't exactly my goal for this, but I figured I'd commit to it for as long as I was able to, seeing as how I could cut out so much extra work the further I went along. I even risked a drill on the manager's safe to get the keycard so that I could shut off one set of lasers. The interior section proved to be relatively straightforward, and after one final trip to the manager's office, I was homing in on the vault, only to get caught out by a classic stealth domino effect. That said, I had just enough time to open the vault directly before the alarm sounded, so if nothing else, I could at least get a head start on breaching the cages and moving the loot. I took the opportunity I had been granted with both hands, making use of the Mark 10 as I swiftly moved the loot to the elevator shaft and slinked out with little trouble. If Hotline Miami goes anywhere near as smoothly, then things shouldn't be too bad. I managed to get things going at a fairly swift pace, once again showcasing my Mark 10's surprising ability to hit ranged targets at the cost of needing Feign Death to help me along. I packed the saw to skip having to drill the cages in the basement, but I'd need the ammo bag asset I placed with pre-planning to actually have enough juice in the tank. From there, things went back to being straightforward, soon getting the address and rolling out to day 2. Clearing out the entire first room before any of the mobsters had the time to process who had just burst out of the box, I used the saw to burst through the gate and reach the Commissar's penthouse in under 2 minutes. The CMP made short work of the bulldozer squad, and I could get started on drilling through to the Commissar while thinning out the snipers on the surrounding buildings. Things were intense as I went down repeatedly, but Feign Death seemed to be refusing to let me die, allowing me to keep a lid on the chaos. I could have let the sniper that had a direct line of sight to the Commissar's panic room finish the man off, but I didn't want him stealing my glory, hosing him down with little recourse and making it out of there at the first time of asking. Hoxton Breakout was the next obstacle in my way, and because of a combination of crowd pressure and poor ammo management, I was soon caught short with no ammo in the CMP and was cut down by a skulldozer from across an entire intersection. Switching to the Mark 10, I wouldn't say that things were that much smoother, but I could at least make it to the car park and use the saw to immediately reach the security office. I did need to give the skulldozer inside the runaround, and I had to use my only Messiah charge, but I could just about squeak out of day 1 with my tail between my legs. At least I could switch the saw for another weapon for day 2, in this case the AK-762. Attempt 1 completely fell apart, needing a Messiah charge early and forcing me into opening the infirmary. While I could Messiah myself again during the holdout at the evidence room, I was soon caught out and unable to get up while my Joker was seemingly sitting things out. Like with day 1, I wouldn't call my second attempt the smoothest ride ever, but I at least had another keycard to play with, and I didn't need the infirmary's assistance. This made the process fairly consistent on the whole, soon able to clear out with the master server in tow and 10 slices of healing still in my back pocket. Hoxton Revenge can be a daunting stealth heist for the unprepared, but taking out cams early can take the pressure off, soon having access to the rest of the house and letting me work on gathering evidence. I did have a bit of a scramble up in this portion of the estate, but I managed to clean it up, find the panic room, and even managed to move the FBI boss to and from the retinal scanner, even without getting caught. After getting caught short by one final guard, I put Hector down for a snooze and hightailed it out under the power of an ECM. Compared to the stealth heists that surround it, the Diamond is a straightforward endeavour that never really gives me that much trouble, especially once cams are down. Only one civilian needed to bite it as I swiftly got access to the inner sanctum, and I soon got an easy enough tile pattern to grab the shiny rock on the other side and secure it in the bagman window. I bum rushed my way out soon after, once again using an ECM to cover my tracks. It was around this point that I actually remembered to pack an Yzma 12-gauge shotgun for future heists, despite me displaying it earlier in the video. It turns out I simply overlooked this thing when figuring out what was legible for the run, so safe to say that I will need to fit it into the run at some point. I would deem it unneeded for the likes of Golden Grin Casino though. This heist usually gives me problems in stealth, but with the locomotive I could at least fling bodies of guards into more favourable positions, letting me clear the staff area with ease. Also, these frame drops you're seeing in the footage is not from me or you. That's just the game. Golden Grin in particular has never ran all that smoothly, especially in the archives for some reason, and it's likely connected to me crashing on this heist in particular. I assume it has something to do with the sheer number of money bundles around the casino and the baggable loot inside the vault, but who knows. In any case, after needing to dispatch someone who just had the misfortune of getting in my way, and then 2 others that I needed to keep out of line of sight of a camera, I could soon clear the back area completely and get the sleeping gas into the room's vents, meaning that I could soon drill my way into the inner vault and lift the dentist's loot into the van. A bit bloodier than I would have liked, but at least I got through without a crash for once. The butcher steps up next for the bomb dockyard, and a pair of needlessly observant dock workers made me fail run 1. But past that, things went a little more smoothly, getting the Murata moving after about 6 minutes. From there, I could easily get access to the containers and manage to haul the bomb parts to the boat escape with minimal fuss. But compared to the heists before it, Scarface Mansion might as well be a full-fledged boss fight, and the first run collapsing in less than 30 seconds set the tone for the rest of the heist. It's usually fine when I can one-shot guards, but if they've spotted something, they're prone to shooting on sight. Even getting into the house didn't erase the possibility of failure. Switching to the Reinfeld cross-kill combo, I eventually got a run that got me all the way towards Sosa's office, but I fumbled with the guard loitering outside the door, sending me all the way back to square one. That was crushing, but at least that was the last failed attempt, as run number 7 proved to be the one. To avoid any unwanted surprises, I took the time to systematically remove all of the roaming guards. It was a close call at times, needing to juggle body bags all over the place, but I was eventually successful. The only problem being I only had one body bag to my name by the time I was ready to move into the house. Mercifully, my time searching Yayo for the microphone recorder was brief, and I could head for the office once more. This proved to be a bit of a scramble as I had to dispatch both of the guards inside the inner sanctum, but once they were down, I could brush aside Ernesto in just one shot. After that, I went out of my way to secure every bag, if nothing else, to just make myself feel better after being stuck on this heist for so long. At least with that task done, we can enjoy a downturn to overkill difficulty for the crime spree portion of the run, and I decided to do things manually from zero in true classic fashion, using my shotgun build and introducing my final needed weapon into the fold, the Yzma. First on the docket was a return to the diamond, and even riding solo with a loud-oriented build, this was still easy to sneak through, getting to the stone in just under 8 minutes and making my daring escape before anyone could process what had happened. Then, to round out the 20 ranks I needed, I simply did the safe house raid unique to the More Heists and Crime Spree mod. Call it what you want, but this at least gives the run a bit of variety. Plus, let's be fair to the Yzma, it could tear through overkill difficulty cops without breaking a sweat. Things were a bit touch and go at times, and I did need more FAKs than I would have liked, but I could eventually grind it out to complete this portion of the run. And with that, I had now used all of the legible weapons that were around on launch day, so all that was left was to see out the rest of the run. Counterfeit is usually not that big a challenge, even with some of the threats that are customary on this heist, but I was cut down on the defense of the water valve, having no Messiah charge and being too stubborn to cancel my interaction to deal with the SWAT that had rolled up next to me. I got further on run 2, going as far as to get the safe open and the printing plates under my arm, but I was cut down in painful fashion, deleted on sight by a sniper right as I was going for the medic bag that would have given me a safety net. It's always hard falling that close to the finish line, but a switch to the M308 gave me that accuracy and power over range that I was looking for, comfortably dealing with the assault and actually waiting to see if I was in line of sight of a sniper on the way to the sewers. Naturally, there were a pair of dozers waiting for me in there, but a quick burst of M308 rounds combined with crits made short work of them, and allowed me to slip out unimpeded. I would have hoped for First World Bank to be a bit of a reprieve, but as is often the case in stealth, you're prone to just getting jump scared by a guard turning a corner or standing in line of sight of a camera while answering a pager. After one more slip up where I guess this guard just gained clairvoyance upon seeing me walk by, I finally got my head on straight, persuaded the manager to hand over his keycard and infiltrated the vault with my usual brand of control. Before long I was out of there with 8 money bags I needed, slipping through the offices and closing it out. Jimmy gets in touch next with Murky Station being the first of his 2 challenges. This one was never going to be that big a hurdle, finding 3 equipment pieces in the basement and soon making my way into the train cars. Before long I had located both of the bomb parts and made a sub 4 minute pacifist clear of the heist. But this is just a brief bit of respite for the real meat of the Hardcore Henry duology, boiling points. Going into this one, I held no illusions over the task that lay ahead of me. If I didn't play correctly, I would simply be punished, no ifs, ands, or buts. After 2 quickfire runs that collapsed under the weight of the mercenaries hounding me, I had a run that got a bit of momentum going, managing to breach into the factory, but getting besieged in the scanner room by the ceiling turret. Despite my best efforts, I was getting torn up relentlessly in the building, requiring me to boost my way out of the building and back into the open air for the medic bag asset. But the reset was ultimately for naught, as I had to use my refreshed charge against a muck that had snuck up on me before being brought to the floor by a Bellmead shield unit. That one was a blow to morale, but it was at that point that I unlocked a core memory. Remember day 2 of Big Oil and how I saved myself with that lone sentry gun? While I couldn't rely on a basic sentry to help me through boiling point, by investing big into hostage taker, sentries and jack of all trades, I could use them as my additional firepower to at least take aggro for me and help with defending objectives. So, armed with my new sentry focus setup, I headed back into the snow once again, and to say that this made the difference would be one hell of an understatement. Now I had the distractions and DPS to cover multiple threats, and I could keep objectives fortified. I did need to take it slowly when entering the factory below the lumber mill, but by doing so I could lure the dozers lying in wait out and systematically take them down. Things were relatively contained once inside, but I found that for some reason, even having up to 3 sentries covering the scanner, they still had difficulty preventing the mucks from shutting it off. Eventually, however, they did get the job done, letting me grab the server just as the assault was ramping up again. It was now just a matter of handling the myriad of snipers lying in wait for me on the escape, and it turned out that the sentries were an ideal tool to go up against them. While it was doubtful that they could reliably deal with them, they could at least draw their attention, giving me enough space to slip the server down the hill and cover my escape from this heist. Overall, a certified dub for the sentry setup, but I won't be using this build unless I feel that it's going to be needed. For what it's worth, I did at least make an effort to do Santa's workshop without their assistance, but within minutes, the SWATs were rushing me from all sides, with me eventually going into custody after a mad scramble to stop my hard-earned presents from being taken from me. That was enough of a wake-up call to swallow my pride and pivot back to the helping hands of the sentries. That said, even they were struggling to keep up on this heist, as the police are just significantly more relentless on this heist for some reason. After presumably getting sniped by a beat cop, attempt number 4 finally went the distance. 3 of the elves were in the same area, allowing for 3 sentries to guard where they were, leaving 1 for the top deck. The system, while hectic, worked like a charm, as they could even cover the bags from their positions. When the time came to start moving loot towards the chimneys, I had 2 sentries guard the frontmost one while putting loot bags inside of it in preparation. I would then plan to do the same for the other side, but as luck would have it, I wouldn't need to wait that long, allowing me to quickly wrap things up and race to safety. Car Shop is a perfectly easy stealth caper that isn't prone for too many mishaps. Even despite me needing to shepherd more civvies than I would have anticipated, I could wrap things up quietly and get the hack completed, only needing 1 pager in the process. After that, it was easy as racing my way out of there with the Falco Genie for an easy first time clear. But we all know what succeeds Car Shop by this point. The biker heist. Rather than flounder around with the other builds at my disposal, I decided not to take chances and rolled up with the sentry build from the word go. This is a decision that actually holds considerable weight. With them, even the worst of the 2 truck spawns proved to be manageable, as I could have 1 or 2 sentries to distract the SWAT turret, along with having another to guard the mechanic. Sadly, despite me getting decently far under these circumstances, my attempts to cut down the SWAT turret for good were interrupted by a pair of snipers instantly bringing me to death's door and throwing the attempt away. It at least proved that even inferior RNG could be salvageable with this setup, but I wouldn't know on attempt number 2. That's because, when it came time to start the special parts objective, the mechanic seemed to decide that he wasn't having any of this shit anymore and tried to make a run for it. I tried tying him and bringing him to the bike, but that just didn't seem to fix it, meaning I was soft-locked. I have ran into this glitch once before, and it still baffles me that this can even happen, and I do wish it could have been patched out or at least allow me to wander him over to the bike to reset things. Oh, who am I kidding, it's Payday 2. If I walked him over to the bike in this state, the game would probably just crash. Third time was the charm, however, with me having the more optimal truck spawn and having the seat objective first so that it's out of the way when the snipers spawn in. The Chrome Skull objective gave me the chance to regroup in safety and get me prepared for the next round of sniper killing. Once the bike was done, I laid sentries all over the place to cover me, before healing through the medic bag and hopping onto Rust's ride to have a more or less clean getaway. Day 2, however, is a bit of a catch-22 situation. I can't take my time, otherwise the cops will swarm me like crazy. But I can't go fast, or I'll run headlong into an unsalvageable situation. At one point I did make it past the biker boss, but I got lazy towards the escape, picked off by a pair of shields that I should have laid a sentry down against. After 4 painful failures on what's supposed to be the easier of the 2 days, I finally got my winning run. Once things became more manageable, I laid my sentries out one more time against the biker boss, and they helped bring her down with little trouble in spite of the bulldozer that tried to come to her aid. I wasn't taking any chances on the escape, using my sentries to clear a path. And once I was on the back half of the train, I was effectively in the clear with no cops in sight. With the sentries having a lot of potency for dealing with more intense heists, bringing them to Panic Room would prove to be sensible. Which is just as well, seeing as how the gangsters in this game have enough strength to split the sun in half. At the very least, things become a little more manageable when I could get past them and Chavez, using 2 sentries for each floor. Then, for the roof section, I placed 1 sentry on each corner of the roof, which worked for a while in holding the snipers at bay, but eventually one of the sentries fell, with me folding soon afterwards. It took up to attempt number 6 to make the adaptation that I had yet to make on this heist. I completely forgot to secure the giant toothbrush, which usually grants me good luck on this heist. Well, to say that this ultimately made the difference would be underselling it. Sure, the source section was a little slower than I would have liked, but I set up on the roof with an experimental sentry formation, setting all 4 up like this at the top of the stairwell leading to the roof. This, in theory, would split the important work, with me taking out snipers while letting the sentries tear through everyone else. But, 15 minutes into the heist, I got a sign from the Payday gods themselves, as I clipped one of the snipers and saw the words, "Trophy unlocked, robbed a cop," flash on my screen. Turns out I had officially reached the point where I had taken down as many police units as there are people in Washington, DC. At least at the time of October of 2016, that is. Clearly, this was a sign blessing the run, as I held firm and stuck to the task at hand. Though it wasn't until the 20-minute mark that I finally figured out where the last sniper was hiding. With that, I could finally get the C4 planted and could work on airlifting the Panic Room out of the building. Probably the best part of the sentry build is that it can hard counter shields, who were otherwise out of reach through most of the run. It took a lot of fighting and a retreat to ground level, but we could eventually get moving after over half an hour of fighting, letting me escape into the sewers and getting this monumental clear over the line. Over 400 kills and the Rob the Cop Safe House trophy can only mean that I can break the back of this challenge handily. But I am getting a little ahead of myself, as before we can even dream of wrapping the run up, we need to head to Brooklyn 1010. The first part covering Sharon was a chore as always, seeing as how the cops throw a disproportionate amount of units at me, even by this game's standards. For the first time in a challenge run, I feel as though the police actually seem to contest my escape to the next building, bringing me all the way down to my last life with Feigned Death refusing to let me go. With the first apartment being too hot though, I was forced to flee, leaving me with no more second chances. As you'd imagine, such a task was daunting and ate away at my precious FAKs, so much so that I only had 1 slice of healing left by the time I reached street level, which I rashly used up after moving the police cars. Despite everything basically trying to go against me though, I held firm for long enough to sprint to the van with no healing or downs left. An inexplicable first time completion. After 2 of the most grueling loud runs I've been a part of back to back, the yacht heist was the ideal reprieve to lower the all stress levels. This was not a hard task, managing to work my way through the money bags from top floor to bottom while only needing 1 kill when setting up for the final section. From there I could just pick off the 2 guards at the server rack, allowing me to grind out a simplistic first time clear. Undercover was the next classic to take care of, and I was unsurprisingly cursed with the rooftop limo drop, forcing me to fight against multiple snipers that tore through me multiple times owing to their sheer numbers. Miraculously though, Feigned Death kept me going for far longer than I had any right to so that I could escape to the medic bag. I still needed another Messiah charge after a sniper forced it out of me, but by this point I was on my way off the roof with the taxman in tow. I thought the Yzma would struggle on Death Wish without DLC mods, but it turns out that it can hold its own as long as I aim for the head. The hack was next, but as per the norm, the game wants to make my life a nightmare by forcing me to the roof and risking a confrontation with the dreaded snipers. Add on the sheer number of dozers and shields that kept flooding the computer room, and this was another brutal run. Despite the difficulties I faced, I was able to make it through the hack, racing up to the roof and clearing out all of the resistance on the way out. You of course know exactly what this leads to. Slaughterhouse. After this proved to be the white whale that I couldn't quite bag during the toy weapons run, you know I want some deep-seated revenge on this heist, with said revenge taking the form of 4 loud sentry guns. You might think that this is an unnecessary flex. Far from it. This heist will drop multiple bulldozers on you, many of them in scripted sequences, and when that occurs, you have to have an answer for it. But when it came to moving the gold, the sentries were the great equalizer. In the past, I was limited in the amount of bags I could move at once due to the pressure of everyone fighting against me. But since I have up to 5 heisters worth of additional firepower at any one time, I could use them to cover the areas where the bags sit, meaning I could afford to move more gold at once. In this case, I could move all 8 bags at the same time and got 6 into the container before the first wave of snipers spawned in. I made it all the way to lifting the gold out and starting the final holdout, but in the most unnecessary throw ever, I let myself be cornered and was brought down, surrendering that 20-minute run for no reason. It was crushing, but it at least gave me the confidence that this was feasible. I just needed to adjust my sentry build to be more well-rounded, shuffling some points to invest in basic high-value target. Things more or less went the same way, using the sentries to cover me and allowing me to move all 8 bags at once into the containers. Unfortunately, 2 of my sentries collapsed under the weight of a pair of rogue dozers, leaving my firepower limited. Still, I made it all the way to the lifting of the gold when a taser held me right in the line of sight of a sniper who brought me down without recourse, as a flashbang robbed me of my sight. Switching the build up again, I simply dropped crits altogether to get high value target aced. This meant that, while I couldn't deal as much damage, I could at least take out problem enemies like dozers and snipers over range a little easier. Attempt 3 wouldn't see the difference it made owing to me being turned into a colander by the brigade of snipers, but attempt 4 was the one, being able to move all 8 bags of gold into the container before the snipers started to descend upon me. Once the snipers were all down, I set down the gas can in the trap and set up for the first holdout, making use of high value target to whittle down bulldozers. I then repeated this previous strategy to deal with the snipers that would spawn back in, just about getting the gold moved before heading back inside for the final time. Once I felt that the gold was close to being in position, I grabbed my sentries and hauled myself up at the blue container where I'd be making my escape. And when it opened up, I wasted no time in getting out of there. Somehow, nobody was there to contest my escape, giving me free rein to escape and get my revenge on Slaughterhouse. Locke steps in for the final portion of the story mode, starting with Beneath the Mountain. It was a bit of a rough ride at first, but the combo of the Car 4 and the Para was able to carry me into the Inner Sanctum. The fight to unlock the 2 vaults I needed was a little intense, but I was able to make my shots count and reach the 2 loot pieces with minimal interruptions. Up top, I was able to weather the initial wave of resistance before working my way through the satellite dishes. The final holdout was a little on the scary side and ate heavily into my remaining healing supplies, but I held out for long enough to get into the chopper and secure my escape. I was going to have to hope for my luck to hold up in any similar way for Birth of Sky. The initial romp through the plane basically went off without a hitch, and I could get to work on the first money pallet quickly. Getting the final pallet in the safety of the diner, I knew the real test of the heist was about to begin. The sewer section. In a twist I wasn't ready for, I ended up glitching through the walls of this dead end and wound up out of bounds. I'm just going to assume that the Marshall shield shoved me through the wall or something. After processing the situation I was in, I was able to phase back into reality and even sequence break to the second gate. But since I was stupid enough to not yank any thermal paste from beyond the bounds, I essentially softlocked myself again. A very strange and unique failure on this heist. This began a long train of failures as I tried to get anything close to the level of success I had in that initial run, running the gauntlet of every build and strategy I had access to in order to work out just which kind of build was going to work on this heist. After I managed to make it to the sewers following an hour's worth of attempts, my Izuma and locomotive were nowhere near enough to repel the initial wave of hostility. This broke me into creating a brand new build altogether, one specifically to hard counter this heist. The initial plan, from what I can understand from watching the footage, was to use the power of shield knockback and heavier duty automatic weapons to make shields less of an issue. After the first test dissolved almost instantly, the second actually made it back to the sewers again, but I ran into the same problem. Even with a Joker in the tunnels with me, the wave of cops poured in faster than I could deal with them. Pair that up with the scripted Skulldozer onslaught after the first grate, and there was no chance for me to get out of here, in spite of Feigned Death's desperate attempts to keep me going. A part of it, as it turned out, was having Crook equipped as my perk deck as opposed to Muscle, but even that wasn't enough to survive down here. The next build I tried after a break was one focusing purely on survival, making use of the ICTV, High Value Target, and Messiah aced. With 2 Jokers at my back and the M308 as my weapon of choice, this build didn't seem to be all that bad. My mobility might have been lacking and I couldn't deal with enemies as quick anymore, but the added defenses of the ICTV with the muscle health pool was a major boon. But in the sewers, even this was not enough. I tried a couple of runs with the trigger-happy Deagle, even silencing it for good measure, but this still wasn't enough. I needed more firepower. And my final throw of the dice would provide just that. Sentry guns were the answers I needed. Using a hybrid build with Jack of all trades to give me 7 first aid kits, this was about as good a defensive build as I could muster. Now I could cover a pallet's location without having to risk myself as much, and whittle down problem enemies before I could even need to get close. I was able to get through all 3 pallets with minimal difficulty, and it was now time for the final test. And I'm delighted to say that they passed with flying colours. Now my build had the appropriate stopping power to deal with the onslaught of Skulldozers, managing to work my way through the endless assault. I did try my best to throw at the last possible second by getting in every seat in the boat except for the driver's seat, so in the end I just decided to hoof it on foot instead. At the very least, I could leverage the sentries on the riverbank to deal with the welcoming committee outside, and with them mostly cleared out, I could run to Locke's chopper for a monumental clear. What a feeling. With that, it was time to move on to Heat Street, and despite needing Feigned Death on the Beat Cop corner of doom, I was able to race my way to the construction site and hold out with the M308 Deagle combo. Roscoe only needed 3 gas cans instead of the usual 4 before he decided to give up, so we could move things along a little quicker. The romp up to the overpass was a brutal one, but it never felt like I wasn't in control. I did need to use a Messiah charge and sprint my way back to the crash site to refill it, but otherwise I could move Roscoe along nicely and notice just how zen this guy must be to not think about the carnage around him. The SWAT turret was at the bottom of the overpass as opposed to the top, which was fine by me as it made the final holdout much easier, only needing 2 kills before Bile felt comfortable with letting us leave. I knew that Green Bridge was a different beast altogether, and if Birth of Sky was any indication, I needed the standard sentry build from the off to even stand a chance. After witnessing this guy have the most exaggerated death to the CMP, I was trying my damn hardest to fix this saw, but the game was having none of it, even sending a Skulldozer my way to finish me off. Even when I could find the prisoner, it just seemed like there was too much going on for the standard sentry build to handle. Attempt 6 finally got some momentum going, even getting the prisoner all the way up to the top of the tower, but I couldn't even begin the escape sequence before RNGesus decided to drop the sky on me. Soon I switched to the sentry build that helped me through Birth of Sky to see if that made a tangible difference, and it did seem to at first, working through the heist with only a few struggles and even getting through the holdout at the tower with only the chopper pilot and the occasional sniper giving me trouble. But when trying to distract the scripted dozer spawns on the escape, I fumbled my hand in trying to place down a first aid kit and completely threw the run. Real grabbing defeat from the jaws of victory kind of deal there. There was one positive from this and the runs that followed though. This build was working, as I was getting consistently further than I was with the previous build. Unfortunately, this was around the point where the game decided to throw a minor tantrum at my perseverance and crash. I'm honestly surprised it took this long for one to happen at all, really. After a few more uninspired failures, I decided to go back to the drawing board one more time to alter the Birth of Sky Buster build into a Green Bridge Buster build, ditching Jack of all trades aced and the medical skills in exchange for Iron Man aced for a pure tank sentry setup. This was inspired. While the lack of first aid kits was a frightening proposition, my armor had a lot more survivability given the sheer lack of cover this heist has. Add on that I have up to 4 distractions at any one time, and I could easily cover myself all the way through the heist, even up until the prisoner was yoinked into the sky. But once again I fell on the escape after a sniper distracted me from the army that crept up behind me. This was frustrating, but it showed me that this build was the answer. And after running it back one more time, despite losing a sentry in the massive battle on the tower, I got through the onslaught and managed to properly set up my sentry distractions for the dozers. Clipping one final sniper, I could finally get down the tower and put this difficult endeavor behind me. I felt so proud of this build's potential that I took it with me into Alaskan deal, but it didn't do me well in avoiding death less than a minute in. I deemed that run as just a warm-up though, as things ran a lot smoother once I could actually get settled in. I could even make use of the allure of the sentries to cover the fuel tank and the generator at the same time, allowing me to focus on picking off snipers and giving dozers the runaround, all while the objective went off without any interruptions. Before long, I was up on the boat and defending it from the intruders, with the heist finishing before I could get zapped to the floor by a taser. After a lot of action on the previous heists, I was more than willing to slow things down a little with a stealthy diamond heist. I've ran through this one enough times to know how to go about it, managing to get into the vault with little in the way of hassles. But trying to get rid of this one guard who was refusing to go anywhere resulted in a natural stealth domino effect, completely ruining the attempt. I wouldn't have been annoyed if this only happened once, but on attempt 2, I got all the way to the bag moving portion before I got caught short, just barely falling before the finish line was in sight. Mercifully, third time was the charm, despite the rough start. Performing the time-honored tradition of breaking Payday's canon with the premature demise of Ralph Garnett, I could finally shut off cams and get a foothold on proceedings. In a more positive twist this time around, I actually got the red diamond vault to spawn, so that was neat. Taking things slowly, I ran the diamond bags up carefully, not wanting a failure this late into the heist. But I could eventually work all 8 bags to the window washing platform. And yes, I did flex by going back for the red diamond. I mean, why wouldn't I? That moves things along to Reservoir Dogs, and I decided to bring the green bridge destroying build for this one, as I knew it'd be needed at the fight at the jewelry store. The first day had a few hiccups owing to the firepower of the beat cops, but once I could actually get a grip on attempt 3, things proceeded easily enough, though I had to waste time opening every storage unit. Overall, this day's not too hard, just a little on the annoying side. But the second day is where the fight truly matters. Compared to the last challenge run that made it this far, however, I was at least ready for the initial onslaught, with the sentries repelling the initial wave of hostility. But when the dozers started to pour in en masse, that was when things started to fall apart, with one sentry falling to pieces and another 2 or 3 nearly following suit. But once all of the skull dozers were cleared out, I could regroup at the vault door, and eventually started to make the perilous trips for the liquid nitrogen. There was a small army waiting inside the vault with even more skull dozers lying in wait, but once they were down, the rest of the ambush squad fell easily enough. Setting up a loot gathering point in one of the lifts with the sentries there to cover the bags, the final fight was intense and threatened to get out of control numerous times. But I held firm and stuck to my task, eventually getting the loot to Mr. Blonde's car and using the medic bag asset to my fullest advantage. Using my sentries to cover my escape and distract any potential stragglers, I could finally race my way to safety and shift the story into its final stages. Brooklyn Bank doesn't offer a lot beyond security guards phasing through tarps. Sure, it is ruthless if you get the cutter entryway like I did, but I had a reliable AK-5 and a pure power Krinkov to try and help with that. I did need to flex a Messiah charge twice early on, but I was soon able to parkour my way back to the objective and got access to the vault area. Things get a little more straightforward when drilling the vault, but the sheer number of things being thrown at me was obscene, even bringing me down to my final life. Regardless, I held firm, kept on top of the threats, and picked my way to the Medallion of Perseids. And with the assault down during all of this, I could run to the van with only one sniper to threaten me. That was rough. And I wasn't counting on breaking feds to give me much in the way of a reprieve, but against my beliefs, this actually wasn't too bad, being able to quickly get across to the second area with a lucky laptop spawn. From there, I could lock the area around Garrett's office with trip mines and take out the cameras. Only one civvy needed to bite it to get through to the security boxes and enter Garrett's office, though I couldn't guess the code in time with the man having only gone 10 feet from his office. Thankfully, all I needed was one hint from Locke to get to the box on the second attempt. It was slow going and needed some juggling on my part to get to the skylight, but a first time clear of such a problematic stealth heist is always welcome. With Henry's Rock, however, I held no delusions of what was needed. If I was to pack anything, it'd be the ICTV Sentry build that helped me cross Green Bridge and Reservoir Dogs. And considering that half of my available firepower was cut down just from the first holdout alone, I could tell that this heist was pulling no punches. Naturally, with only 2 sentries as backup, I wasn't going to get terribly far. After the second attempt didn't even get me into the main complex, I finally went the distance on run number 3, helped by all 4 of my sentries actually surviving the first holdout this time. Despite the pressure, I was into the crate to grab the first coffer, and the lab was perfect for the sentries to shine as I got to the second. Unfortunately, around the point of dealing with the turrets, the game was throwing enough doses at me to start destroying my precious sentries. Nevertheless, I let the sentries cover the power boxes as I went to get the medic bag and recruit some new jokers. The final holdout was tense and brutal, but with 3 sentries still ready to put in work, I could take advantage of their incredible distracting capabilities to clip the final chopper sniper and load the boxes into Biles' helicopter for a monumental clear. Shacklethorne provides the final stealth challenge before the big one at the White House, and unsurprisingly, the vault room is impossible to traverse while the cameras are up due to the civvies down there. Beyond that slip-up though, it wasn't all terrible, taking out cams and just about dealing with the worst possible hacking points. Taking no chances, I wanted to clean out the vault room and eventually used up the last of my pages. I could clean this up though, getting to the blowtorch in the process of getting the keycard from the auctioneer. This was essentially the final hard part of the heist, getting to the tablet and clearing out of the auction house through the cover of ECMs. Hell's Island is the final hard challenge left in the run, and I initially decided to go at it with the pistol build as it hasn't had much to cheer about in this challenge. But Hell's Island showed it was for good reason, as its available firepower was found sorely lacking in the initial assault, going into custody and proving that this was the wrong call. Next was a double pump action shotgun build, which went a lot smoother, even managing to contain the brutal army in the Bane pursuit section. Despite serving me well through the escape, I was eventually forced to use my final Messiah charge and my final first aid kits, and Feign Death couldn't keep me alive against the murky water forces for long enough to slip out. I then tried using the Yzma for a bit of extra speed, but it didn't seem to make a tangible difference. For one final roll of the dice, I went full auto with the JP-36 and Mark 10, and this proved to be the winning play. With these weapons, I had the sustainability to hold off all of the threats and even held out through the final escape. I did have a heart and mouth moment when I got cornered with no ammo left in my secondary, leading to a mad scramble going up and down repeatedly with Feign Death working overtime until my final down. But with one Messiah charge in my back pocket for this very occasion, I could scramble my way up the stairs and finally escape Hell's Island with less than 7 seconds to spare. That was tense. No Mercy is intended to be little more than a victory lap this late into the run, being a simple corridor shooter with some medical work in between. And I thought the same sort of build that pulled me through Hell's Island would be sufficient here, but as it turns out, the cops can eat through your first aid kits like it's nothing out here. While I did manage to get the lift open around this point, the game was refusing to play ball and give me a valid sample, forcing me into a game of cat and mouse that I just didn't have the resources to win. Clearly, if this heist was going to fight dirty, then I'd simply have to fight dirty back. The Green Bridge Buster was going to be brought out one last time to help carry me home. And, as you'd expect, the sentries were in their dream environment, free to shoot down the halls of Mercy Hospital and tear through anyone that walks into their line of sight. Once into the ICU itself, I used the power of chairs to give my sentries the perfect sightline down the halls. I only needed 2 saws before I could finally begin the blood extraction process, and I was willing to just let the sentries go to work while I set up the samples. Beyond the trips to get the power back on, things were going smoothly until the game decided that it wasn't having any of my shit anymore and dropped a pair of minigun dozers right on top of me. I was thankfully able to survive that confrontation, but one of my sentries wasn't so fortunate. The sacrifice didn't appear to be in vain though, being able to get both vials into the cooler and confirming my success in the run, with my Joker even deciding to join me during my escape by phasing through the doors. But with Mercy Hospital behind us, it was time for the final challenge. The White House. And as you'd expect, I brought the Amcar and Shimano 88 to this job because it just felt right to do so after they got us off the ground in this challenge. Getting into the West Wing was easy enough, same with the Oval Office, with the safe once again behind the portrait of Honest Abe. Despite the game of Frogger I had to play with all of the guards in the area, I ended up getting the code easily enough and grabbed the POC keycard without being seen. Once inside the POC itself, I dealt with the guards inside to take all of the threats out of the area. Even the additional guard they spawned in after the fact didn't pose a threat in the end, given that I had a spare pager. With all of them taken care of, I could get into the vault and grab the pardons with no more resistance. One walk out of the White House later, and that was that. I got on board the helicopter, finishing the game and proving that yes, you can indeed beat Payday 2 with only launch day weapons. Not surprising in the end, but still an enjoyable romp through the game nonetheless. It's just nice to see some of these overlooked weapons be capable of dishing out some damage even at this level of gameplay. I did have to flex all of the available tools in my arsenal, especially the sentry gun, but I'm at least glad that they were legal for this challenge, as I'd imagine things around the later stages of the run would prove to be a hassle otherwise. Despite being one of the cleanest runs with only one crash, it also provided some of the strangest antics I've ever dealt with in a challenge run so far, so it did feel a little weird at times. Oh well. Either way, that's the end of this video. Throw us a like if you enjoyed, subscribe for more, and feel free to leave any suggestions for future challenge runs in the comments below. I'm always open to ideas, and what you suggest to me could end up being a future video. But until that point comes along, I'll see you on whatever I do next. Take care now.